I think it's worth stressing these ideas a little bit more, or let's say again. So first thing is, what we do is intangible. We don't work with tangible goods. We work with things that we cannot touch, we cannot smell, we cannot see. We work with knowledge. We are knowledge workers. And knowledge is a kind of an ephemeral concept. And what we do, the kind of goods that we create are ephemeral goods. Meaning that, for example, the keyboard on this device, it's ephemeral. It's not a real keyboard. It's something that it can be represented in one way or another because there is no physical dependence with the device. So we work with intangible things, which of course, for example, are difficult to measure. They are difficult to share. They are difficult to create if you work in a team. And in fact, I'm sorry, when I say that software is intangible, the analogy there is that of course, we write code. But code is just an arbitrary representation of what we really want to do. In the same thing that music can be represented in different ways, but the ideas, the musical idea remains the same. We write code, we sell software, different things. And the other thing is that what we do is necessarily cooperative. We cannot work just by ourselves if we want to address problems of a reasonable amount of complexity. Of course, I mean, you could write a software system for controlling the air traffic over UK just by yourself. Problem is, it will take you too long to be feasible. It would take you 50 years, and nobody would want that after 50 years. So we need to work in teams to address complexity. We need to work on intangible things in teams. And that's kind of challenging. And the other thing is that what we do is a constant process of exploration and adaptation. We need, as Dan brilliantly pointed out this morning, if you write the same piece of code over and over and over and over again, there's something wrong, right? Everything we do has a certain amount of unplanned, uncharted territory. Otherwise, we would not do that again. So we explore, we adapt, we learn about ourselves and about the world as we go. Unfortunately, the culture in which we live, and when I say we, I mean everybody, you, me, myself, companies, it's a culture that we just grew up. It comes basically from the industrial revolution. So it comes from an important moment in the history of mankind when we learned to create, to mass produce tangible things, which is exactly the opposite of what we do. We never mass produce anything, and what we produce is not tangible. Okay. So that's one thing, but we still have this kind of culture. Many of the management styles and schools today are still based somehow to a certain degree to this kind of culture, which I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not even saying it's right. I'm just saying that it doesn't fit well with what we do. We also come from this. We come from educational systems that were designed in the image of the Industrial Revolution and were designed to support the Industrial Revolution. And the concept of standardizing, including standardized learning, was very important. One thing, for example, in there is that there is no concept of a team in that model, because you need to be evaluated by your individual performance as a learner. In the same way that if you work on an assembly line, you need to be evaluated on your ability to produce things. So it's individualism. Not all educational systems are that bad, but they carry this seed in them. And the other thing that we do is we also think that we can run our businesses in a kind of a predictable way. That we can, for example, today plan the budget for 2015, which is just, you could just roll the dice and would be the same thing. Okay. completely unpredictable. The level of uncertainty in which this industry lives is far greater than many other industries on this planet because of the nature of what we do and the speed with which things change. So basically what I'm saying is that there is a gap between what we do and how we do it. We come from a culture where we think that things are linear, they can be standardized, and they are predictable. What we do, in fact, is working in a context where we develop intangible goods. It's a collaborative environment based on teamwork and sharing knowledge and learning as we go. And it's a context in which we adapt and learn constantly. Very different cultures, very different. Then again, I'm not saying that it's good or that it's bad. I'm just saying that's what it is. And to me, the space between these two cultures is extremely interesting. And the reason why it's so interesting is because many of the mental models with which your teams and your companies, basically they work every day, maybe they're not helping you as much. By mental model, I mean a way in which we perceive reality, we understand, create an image of reality and react to that image. That's what I mean by mental model. Okay. For example, one mental model that we acquire in school is that you can never make mistakes. You don't do mistakes at school, because if you do, you get a bad grade. And if you do, your parents are going to be upset with you. So that's a mental model. Mistakes are bad. But for what we do, mistakes are the way we learn. You cannot learn, you cannot innovate anything if you are not prepared to make mistakes. I'm not saying that making mistakes is positive or it's a good thing. I'm saying that if you want to be creative and innovative, you must be prepared to make mistakes. Something that we don't learn from school, for example. Some of the mental models are also related to management and leadership. And I would like to talk about leadership. And by leadership, I mean guiding a group of people towards a shared goal. Helping this group of people to reach a shared goal. That's my definition of leadership in this context. Management is slightly different. Management has to do with objectives and figures and time constraints and so on and so on and so on. Okay? Leadership is a different story. Now, why do you need leadership? Because leaders are responsible for creating the culture and the ecosystem in which your teams work. They influence the culture of the ecosystem. And one thing about leadership is that another mental model that we acquired is that we need top-down managers. In our world, in the Agile world, we call that command and control. And Dan explained very well what command and control means this morning. The thing is, as Ross Marion said in a book, the book is called Organizational Management, I think, or Complexity Management. Complexity Management is the title. It just says, top-down managers and leaders are just as incapable of coordinating the complexities of human environments as queen bees are of bee environments. It's just too complex. Just too complex to be coordinated top-down. Then again, I'm not talking about a workflow. I'm not talking about the way you work on the code, you test your code. I'm not talking about practices. I'm talking about the social and relational culture in your organization. That is too complex for a top-down manager to organize. I think we can do better. Because, then again, I'm not stigmatizing our technical mindset. We need a technical mindset for what we do because we work in a technical industry. Technical proficiency is the way that we do what we do. Okay? So we need that. At the same time, we need something more. We need a better understanding of the organic nature of organizations and the way they work, so that what we do technically also fits well with what we are as human beings. That's my point. So what about self-organization? Well, self-organization is critical to the Agile culture, is built into Agile since the beginning. It's even quoted literally in the manifesto. This is a sentence from the Agile Manifesto. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. It's been there for the last 12 years. Okay? It's been there since the beginning. But it's also mentioned somehow in other parts of the manifesto. Build projects around motivated individuals, give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done, which is what Dan was talking about this morning with the military, with the US Army. You set the goal, you give them what they need, go, and adapt. And I trust you to get the job done. So that's another form of self-organization. Business people and developers, they must work together throughout the project. Now, if you think about it, these two tribes, okay, they have different cultures. Technical people, they observe a problem from a certain perspective. If I observe this object from a technical perspective, I see certain things. Like, for example, it's mainly programmed in Objective-C. It's a technical information. If I look at the same object from a business perspective, well, I want to talk about the cool factor of this object, market penetration, and so on and so on and so on. Different perspective, right? And these two tribes, they need to cooperate daily throughout the project. They need to work together, even though they speak different languages. And that's another form of self-organization. They need to find a way to do that. And then, when we say that the team, basically, from time to time, they stop what they're doing, then they check what they're doing, and then they tune and adjust their behavior accordingly. That's a form of feedback that the team is giving to itself. Is a way in which this social system adapts itself to the environment by observing the external environment, observing themselves, and making changes to the way they work as a social unit. So self-organization has been there since the beginning. Sometimes when I explain Agile to clients, I use this triangle, which I like. For me, one of the ways of explaining Agile is that it's based on transparency, feedback, and self-organization. It's value-driven. You want to deliver value. It's based on the concept of continuously improving what you do, and also at a sustainable pace. But the way you do this is through transparency, feedback, and self-organization. Now, transparency is the concept that all the information that people need to do what they do is available. For example, task boards are a form of transparency. We just stick on the wall cards which represent what everyone is working on at a given moment in time. And works that we still have to do, work that is in progress, work that we have done. And this information is available to the entire team. Everybody knows everything about everybody else, about what they are doing, what they've been working on, what they will be working on. That's a form of transparency. It's just one example. Feedback. We have a large amount of ways to get feedback in Agile. If you do continuous integration, you get feedback from a machine that from time to time will tell you the health state of your code base. If you do pair programming, you have feedback every few seconds from another human being that's making suggestions to you. If you run a retrospective every couple of weeks, you have feedback from the entire team. So we need feedback to adapt to what we find, to adapt to the environment. And we use that information to self-organize. Without transparency and without feedback, you could not self-organize. Now, thing is, these three cornerstones for some organizations are very challenging. Just the idea of transparency is challenging in some organizations. Giving feedback or receiving feedback, personal or group feedback, is extremely challenging in some organizations, not to mention self-organization. So it's a profound cultural change, but we'll get to that. Thing is, you need self-organization. Because if you don't self-organize, it means that you are still stuck in the command and control culture of linear processes, where things happen because there is a very clear defined order, and this order is defined by someone up there who says what should be done and when and how. Okay? So my definition of self-organization is that I would like to make this very clear. Self-organization is not a goal, it's not a sport, it's not a practice. It's an emergent behavior, it's a collective behavior. It happens. Self-organization is something that happens when every individual takes personal responsibility in co-creating a shared future. That's my personal definition of self-organization. It's a collective behavior that manifests when people take personal responsibility in co-creating a future that we all share. If you do that, you can only self-organize. You have no other choice. So what do we mean, for example, by shared future and co-creating? And then again, we go into more detail about that. Now, another thing I've learned about self-organization is, if you think about it, pretty obvious. When someone says that to you, but apparently not at the beginning, you cannot enforce self-organization. In other words, how could you organize something that is supposed to self-organize? You cannot organize self-organization. Self-organization happens. So the question is, where is the source of your self-organization? I like the iceberg simile when I talk about self-organization, because what I've learned is that, for example, there are certain things that are very visible in a self-organizing team. As I mentioned, task boards are a good way to self-organize. But task boards are just a tool for self-organization. It's something tangible and visible that you can use to help people to self-organize. And then there are other things that are intangible, but still important. And those are below the surface of the water. And they constitute the major part of self-organization. It's the cultural part, basically. But my point here is that there is no way that you can enforce self-organization. You can only create an environment in which self-organization happens spontaneously. You cannot enforce it. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, when you talk about self-organization in some companies, some people get scared because they say, what do you mean, my people, they decide what to do? Yes. Your people decide what to do, up to a certain point. Up to the point where their decisions are still aligned with your business goal. If you have alignment with a business goal, they can decide, for example, how to work. They can decide if you want to have the stand-up meeting at 3 p.m. or 8 a.m. It's their decision. They can make technical decisions as long as these decisions are aligned with the business goal. So who's responsible for making this business goal clear and shared, and even better, to make people feel as part of this goal, to help people participate in this goal? Tricky, but doable. Tricky, but doable. So what I want to say at this point is that self-organization is natural, it's organic. Even if you do not organize anything, there will be an emergent behavior anyway. You see what I mean? There is no, as social beings, we self-organize spontaneously. There is never chaos in a social unit. There could be an emergent behavior which is not what you want, but there will be some kind of structure. Now the thing is, how do you align this structure with the business goal? Because, I mean, if you're working in a company, you're getting paid to get some work done, right? The company is giving you a desk, a computer, snacks, they're giving you a paycheck, they're giving you nice colleagues to work with, they're giving you a lot of stuff, right? And this stuff needs to be paid for. If you want to stay in business, okay, self-organize and be aligned with the business goal, right? I'm saying this because I don't want to sound too new age-ish, okay? I'm really talking about business here. I'm talking about a way of doing business, okay? And so this kind of alignment is extremely important. Now, let's go a little more down to the core. There is a word that is usually associated with the concept of self-organization, which is empowering the teams. It's a good word, it's a good concept, because behind it there is this idea that you trust your people. If you empower someone to do something, you're basically saying, okay, guys, I trust you. You now have the power to do this, a power which you didn't have 1 minute ago. Okay, not too bad, not too bad. I think we can do better than that. I think there is a better word than empowerment. When I look at a team that self-organizes nicely, usually I see some traits both in leaders and in the teams. And there are some traits that, in my opinion, are distinctive of leaders capable of creating a self-organizing culture. The first one is the ability to share the goal. The first one is the ability to bring people on board and so that they can share a future with you. We'll talk a little bit more about this concept, but it's critical that you do not impose goals. You need to share the goals. There are different levels. I'll talk more about that. But if you are imposing the goal, probably your self-organization is going to suffer a little bit. Other things. Of course, it's the responsibility of the leader to identify and make constraints known. If that's the goal, but we need to get there in 3 months' time, otherwise the client will cancel this contract, well, that's good to know, thank you. Good information. And we can self-organize around that. We can self-organize around that constraint. Not only around the goal, but also around the constraint. It's the responsibility of the leader to provide the necessary resources and environment, which is, by the way, was part of the manifesto, right? You trust your people and you give them what they need to get the work done. You create a good ecosystem for them. You agree on feedback cycles. Feedback is essential to know if what they are doing is aligned with the expectations. And the best way to know that is to check from time to time. There is some confusion sometimes I find in certain companies about the word delegate. Now, to me, delegate means that I trust someone to do something for me, and after a while I will check that what they did meets my expectations. This feedback is essential. The other form of delegation, oh, do this for me so that I can forget about it. Okay, that's not delegation. That's just, shifting the burden to someone else and, okay, I'll do this and I'm doing other things. Okay, so feedback cycles for a leader are essential. If you set goals, if you create shared goals, you also need to check from time to time. How frequently do you check? Ask your people. Let me give you a concrete example. If you are a manager or leader, you might want to step into the gemba, as they say in Lean, the production floor from time to time, and check how they're doing. You could say, okay, guys, is it okay if every couple of days I come to you and we take a look at the burn down charts together? They could say, you know what, 2 days are not right now. It's not good information. Let's make 5 days. Okay, every week, every Thursday morning. Okay, we'll tell you something about our burn down chart because that's good information. Okay, you share, you agree on the feedback cycles, and then of course you are available every time. Every time they need you, if you're a leader, if you're supporting them, you are there. you are available constantly. Mm? Now, let's talk about teams. There are some traits that are distinctive of self-organizing teams as well. And, for example, trust and open communication. Patrick Lencioni, in the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, is defining very well the concept of trust. By trust in a team, we mean it means when you know that you can speak out your mind openly without any fear of retaliation of any kind. That's the kind of trust we're talking about. I can express my opinion without any fear of retaliation, of being attacked or being criticized or so on and so on and so on. So that it becomes a foundation for open communication. Then of course commitment, accountability to peers, not to the leader, but first of all you feel accountable to your peers if you are a self-organizing team. And then of course collaboration and self-transcendence, which is a big word, very big word. Basically it means that I can have my own agenda, at the same time I know that I can put it aside from time to time because there is something bigger than my own agenda. That's what we call self-transcendence. Okay? Now, if you're able to create such a culture in your team or in your company, I think that the word empowerment doesn't suffice any longer. And a better word would be emancipation. Because the difference between empowerment and emancipation is that if someone empowers you to do something, well, they can decide to take that power back one day. Okay? Emancipation is mainly irreversible. When women emancipated, or African Americans emancipated, it's very hard that we can go back in time. So that's a kind of profound change, profound transformation that as a leader you might want to see in your organization. Something that you achieve maybe by mistakes, or maybe by small fail-safe experiments. You try a little bit of this, you try a little bit of that, but eventually the change becomes irreversible. Nice. So, one more thing about sharing the goal. There are different ways in which you can create a shared goal for a group of people. For example, you could tell people what the goal is. Guys, we need to deliver that feature next month, period. Okay, that's the goal. Okay. Or you could try to sell it to your people. If we could deliver that feature in 1 month, that would be great. That would be the best moment in this company ever. Okay? Sell it. You could test the goal. What do you think if we try to deliver that feature in 1 month? Any problem there? Testing. Or you could consult. I think we should really deliver that feature in 1 month. What do you think about how can we do that? Do you have any suggestion? How can we get there? Now you see, as you move up the ladder, there is more and more engagement. It's very different to ask people, okay, we need to go there in 1 month. What do you think we should do? What do you think is the best way to get there? Let me know what you think. Give me your opinion. Speak out your mind. Okay? Very different from just telling. From just saying, okay, well, that's the goal, 1 month, go work, bye. I'll see you in 1 month. Okay, very different. Okay. Or you could code create. And that's a bit trickier. That means that you ask your people, okay guys, what do you think our goal for next month should be? And that goal needs to be aligned with our business strategy, which you cannot decide, because it's not your responsibility to design a business strategy. Your responsibility is to create a solution, to see which options are available to implement this strategy. Okay? So you cannot decide the strategy. That's decided at another level. But knowing the strategy, what do you think our next goal should be? Very different. Very different. Okay? So, what I've been trying to tell you so far is that self-organization depends on the kind of culture that you're able to create in your team or company or organization. And it mainly depends on the attitude of the leaders and on their ability to move away from post-industrial mental models which are not serving you very well today. That's to make a long story short. Okay? But I would also like to tell you some stories from the field. I think I have 10 minutes left, is that correct? Okay, thank you. So stories from the field, real stories. As I said, my work is to work with companies, teams. Sometimes I work with CEO millionaires, and sometimes I work with quality assurance people. So I can see the entire hierarchy, because we still have hierarchies. Okay? And so some stories, which I'm going to relate to you, are on different levels. First one is about the technical team. Now, you could call this an anti-pattern for self-organization. Okay? This is what you don't want to see in a self-organizing team. Okay? I was in this team once, and these guys, the first day I entered that room, one thing that struck me was the way they had arranged the office, because they managed to arrange all the desks and computers and printers in such a way that everyone was divided from everybody else. Total division, fences. Okay, that's the title, building fences. And that was just a physical environment. But then when I learned more about their culture, I started noticing certain behaviors. Like, for example, in this team, it was not a very large team, 15 people, one manager, one tech lead, and 13 more guys, all in the big room, okay, all in the same room. So divisive talk, that's one thing they used to do. What divisive talk is when you say something that is, which effect is to divide people rather to bring them together. Like, for example, did you hear what Paul said about you last night? Okay, divisive talk. I'm not trying to create a good cooperation, I'm trying to create division. Okay? Taking side against something. Taking side, it's inevitable. What one thing is to take side and be with what you like, and the other thing is taking side and go against what you don't like. Everything that you do that goes against something is usually an indication of a conflict. Okay. I hate you, I don't like you, these guys are idiots, our users don't understand anything. Our PO should go to a PO course, okay? Training class, okay? Go against, okay? Which is different from saying, well, okay, we could do better with managing the backlog, because we like a nice, well-groomed backlog. I stay with what I like rather than go against what I don't like. Withholding information, I don't share what I know, because that gives me power. Or at least that's the mental model. Since I don't share, I am more powerful, because people will need to come to me and ask me. I am the oracle, okay? Not the company, the oracle, okay? People will need to come to my cave to get information from me. So that kind of thing. You can imagine what is the effect on self-organization of such an attitude. Being pleased by other speakers. These guys are going down, so cool. Well, ethically could not be a problem, but for me it's an indication of a mind which is again a mind of it's us against them. It's a mind of division, rather than, okay, we are companies in the same market and we are nicely competing with each other. Actually, we are learning from each other. Because if you have competitors, it's because that's a good market. If it were a bad market, you would have no competitor, for example. And of course, pointing out others' mistakes. Now, pointing out mistakes, of course, is related to blaming. Blaming something that, the same blaming. Okay? It's something that in some companies, some culture is very present, but even when it is latent, it's a problem. Because blaming, as I said earlier, at school, one thing that you learn is you are not supposed to make mistakes. And if you make mistake, someone will blame you. Okay? Now, as I mentioned, you cannot be innovative and creative if you are afraid of being blamed. So a blaming culture is what prevents people from being creative. It's what I call a big energy blocker in the team. It prevents people from being active and sharing. So what's the definition of blaming? Blaming is basically just an observation of a behavior and an evaluation of that behavior, except that you attach some kind of emotional quality to this evaluation, and you give this evaluation from a position of superiority, or at least perceived superiority. Okay, it is your fault, dude. Okay, and you always do that. Okay, sorry, man. It's just helping me. Okay, okay. That thing. Superiority and emotional attachment. I'm so much better than you are because I never make mistakes. That makes me feel so good. Okay, that thing. That brings to the judgment. So you want to be careful about that. Another thing you want to be careful about is how you relate to your colleagues. Another story was from, oh, by the way, these guys, the guy I just spoke about with the desks that created fences, I could do nothing for them because that was not the reason they called me in. I was there for technical reasons, not to coach the team. So I did not interfere. But what was extremely interesting for me was to see that their mental models, the way they spoke, the way they acted, and even the physical environment that they eventually created for themselves were aligned on one single wavelength, which was divide. Divide, 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 divide. Okay. That is not going to help your self-organization. Definitely not. Another thing, I worked with a manager, and this guy called me in because in his opinion, the team was not taking initiative and do things except when he would tell them. Okay? At some point, I learned that this manager used to do funny things like go into the developer's room and do things that they were supposed to do. For example, we introduced Kanban in that company. And he was the one who wanted to draw the Kanban board that the developers were supposed to use. There was some point, because the guy is very smart, very knowledgeable about what they do. But he's no longer a developer. And he was treating developers as children rather than adults. And that was the main problem. The people, the developers, were not taking responsibility because they were being parented by this guy. Okay? In transactional analysis, which is one psychological discipline, we say that we have different ego states, child, adult, parent. And thing is, if you act as a parent to someone, it's very likely that the other person, even unconsciously, will react as a child. Very normal. And unconscious most of the time. But the only kind of dynamic that works on the workplace is adult to adult. Because the difference between a child and an adult is that the adult takes responsibility. The adult takes personal responsibility. Okay? So adult to adult is the only kind of dynamic that can work on the workplace. And if you see something like someone being childish and someone acting like a parent, that's not going to work your self-organization, to help your self-organization. Last thing, and then we're done. Okay. Another pattern which I see sometimes is when people try to go against the tide, as I say, which is basically when someone starts complaining or making requests about things that are not appropriate in the position that that person is taking. Like, for example, yes, I'm a tester, okay? And I would like to have a good infrastructure for automatic tests, okay? Did you say that to your manager or to your leader? Yeah, we spoke about that, but the guy is an idiot. Okay, that kind of thing. And so, basically, not respecting the fact that it's not your responsibility to make the decision to spend a lot of money and a lot of effort to implement a nice infrastructure for automatic tests, and just saying, we should do that, and the guy doesn't understand a thing. Okay? That's, for me, is going against the tide. It's not understanding that you are not in the position to feel pissed off by that decision, because it's not your responsibility. It is not your responsibility. Well, of course, you can make suggestions. I hope you make suggestions. I hope you can openly communicate and explain the benefits and the risks and the costs of that kind of decision to someone who has to take that decision. But you need to respect that decision. Not respecting that decision without taking the responsibility for not taking that decision doesn't work. It only creates stress in the team, creates stress in people. I'm so pissed off, and so probably I'm not going to be a good team worker. Okay? Anyway, that's another pattern that you might want to keep an eye on. And I think we're done. And I think on time, right?
Perfect.
Okay. Just to wrap it up, I told you that you can only enable self-organization. You can create an environment for self-organization. You cannot enforce it. You need people taking personal responsibility as adults. And people trusting each other and being able to communicate openly with each other, even when they disagree, especially when they disagree. Especially when they disagree. Okay? So you need good cohesion, a shared goal, which is also essential. A shared goal is the way you keep your team aligned, even though it's self-organized. Okay? So you need all of that. How do you start? You start from yourself. If you are a leader, you start from yourself. Because in my experience, if you change something inside, something outside changes as well. And we're done. So, thank you very much for your attention. That's me. The slides are on SlideShare. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and it's been a pleasure sharing this with you. Thank you very much.
Between now and the next session, I'm sure that you've got questions for Andrea. Please feel free to ask some questions. I know Andrea's happy to take them as a whole room, or if you want to do them one-to-one. But there is only a 15-minute gap until the next session, so if you need to go off and do something.